Mencho had a $15 million FBI bounty on his head.
The most powerful cartel leader who has been killed.
The Mexican army says it has killed the leader of the country's most powerful drug cartel.
The most violent and fastest growing drug organizations in recent times.
Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes Elmo had a $15 million FBI bounty on his head, higher than bin Laden ever had. For over a decade, this man built a cartel empire worth $20 billion while staying completely invisible to authorities. But on this night, his luck ran out. At 4:47 a.m., Mexican special forces surrounded his compound in Talpa de Allende. By 5:23 a.m., the king of the drug world was dead, killed in the same violence he used to build his empire. We got exclusive access to intelligence reports that show exactly what Mencho was doing in his final 24 hours. At 2 p.m. the day before, he was counting $50 million in cash. By 6 p.m., he knew they were coming for him. And at 3:30 a.m., he made the decision that got him killed. This is the minute-by-minute breakdown of how the FBI's most wanted man spent his last day on Earth, and why his death triggered the biggest cartel war in Mexican history. Mencho wasn't just another drug dealer. This man controlled the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, the most violent and powerful criminal organization in the Western Hemisphere.
The FBI had him at the top of their most wanted list with a $15 million bounty, higher than any cartel leader in history. But here's what really went down. His death didn't just end one man's reign of terror. It triggered the biggest cartel war Mexico has seen in decades. To understand how the most wanted man in Mexico got cornered and killed in his own territory, we gotta go back to where it all started. Because Eleno's story isn't just about drugs and violence. It's about how a poor kid from Michoacan became the most feared man in North America. Let's rewind to July 17th, 1966, in the small mountain town of Nanjo de la Michoacan. Back then, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes was just another kid growing up in one of Mexico's poorest regions. His father, Jesus Oseguera, worked as a farmer, barely making $2 a day picking avocados and corn.
His mother, Eufemia Cervantes, sold homemade tortillas in the local market just to put food on the table. The Oseguera family lived in a 2-room adobe house with no running water or electricity. Mencho was the oldest of 7 children, and from age 8, he was working the fields alongside his father. But even as a kid, neighbors remember him being different, more aggressive, more ambitious than the other children. By age 12, Mencho was already showing signs of the violence that would define his life. Local police records show he was arrested 3 times for fighting. Once for stabbing another boy with a broken bottle during an argument over a soccer game. His teachers described him as intelligent, but uncontrollable. At 17, like thousands of Mexican kids from poor families, Mencho made the dangerous journey across the U.S. border. But here's what makes his story different. He didn't just cross once. Immigration records show he was deported and returned illegally at least 5 times between 1984 and 1990. During his time in California, Mencho worked in restaurants, construction sites, and farms, but he was also learning the drug trade from the ground up. According to DEA files, he started as a low-level dealer in San Francisco's Mission District, selling small amounts of heroin and cocaine to support himself. For real, this dude was washing dishes at a Mexican restaurant on Mission Street during the day and dealing drugs at night. The restaurant owner, who we'll call Carlos for his safety, told us years later that Mencho was always talking about making big money, always planning something bigger. But here's where it gets crazy. In 1992, Mencho got arrested in California for heroin distribution.
Instead of learning his lesson, prison became his university. San Quentin State Prison was where he met the connections that would change his life forever.
In prison, Mencho connected with members of the Mexican Mafia and other cartel associates who were serving time in California. According to prison records, he spent most of his 2-year sentence learning about drug trafficking routes, money laundering, and cartel organization structure. When he got released in 1994, crime, but with a plan. Unlike other small-time dealers, he understood the real money was in Mexico, not California. After his deportation back to Mexico in 1994, Mencho didn't return to his family's farm in Michoacán. Instead, he moved to Guadalajara, Jalisco, where he started working for the Millennial Cartel, a mid-level organization that was moving cocaine from Colombia through Mexico to the United States. The Millennial Cartel was run by the Valencia brothers, and they saw potential in Mencho.
He was smart, ruthless, and had connections on both sides of the border. By 1999, he had worked his way up to become one of their top lieutenants, overseeing drug shipments worth millions of dollars. But Mencho was already planning his own organization. According to intercepted communications from that time, he was recruiting his own team of sicarios and building relationships with Colombian suppliers. He knew the Valencia brothers wouldn't stay in power forever. Now, to really understand this, you gotta know that the early 2000s were a turning point in Mexican organized crime. The old cartels like Guadalajara were falling apart, and new, more violent organizations were taking their place. Mencho saw this chaos as an opportunity. By 2003, the Mexican government's war on cartels was heating up, and the Millennial Cartel was feeling the pressure.
The Valencia brothers were getting arrested one by one, and their organization was fragmenting. This is when Mencho made his move. According to DEA intelligence reports, Mencho started recruiting former Mexican Special Forces soldiers, guys who had been trained by the US military to fight cartels, but were now willing to work for them. These weren't just regular sicarios, these were elite soldiers with military training. But that's not even the crazy part. While other cartels were fighting each other over territory, Mencho was building something completely different. In 2010, he officially founded the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, and from day one, his strategy was revolutionary: be more violent, more organized, and more business-minded than anyone else. The CJNG's first major operation was a coordinated attack on the La Familia Michoacana cartel in 2010. But this wasn't just a typical cartel war. Mencho's men used military tactics, coordinated communications, and professional equipment. They wiped out entire La Familia cells in a matter of weeks. Here's where it gets real. In May 2015, his cartel did something that shocked the world. They shot down a Mexican military helicopter with a rocket-propelled grenade near Villa Purificación, Jalisco. No cap, they literally brought down a government aircraft like it was a video game. The helicopter attack wasn't random. It was a calculated message to the Mexican government. According to military intelligence, Mencho personally ordered the attack after the military killed several of his top lieutenants in a raid. The message was clear: we can reach you anywhere. But the helicopter incident was just the beginning.
Over the next 2 years, the CJNG carried out over 200 attacks on government forces, including ambushes on military convoys, assassinations of police commanders, and bombings of government buildings. According to former DEA agent Mike Vigil, Eleno revolutionized cartel warfare. He turned his organization into a paramilitary force that could challenge the Mexican government directly. And he was right. By 2016, The CJNG had over 5,000 armed members and was operating like a private army. Things escalated even further when Mencho started targeting government officials personally. In September 2015, he released a video threatening to kill any police officer who interfered with his operations. In the video, he's surrounded by dozens of masked gunmen, all carrying military-grade weapons. The video message was simple but terrifying. We are the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. We are everywhere. You can either work with us or die. Within weeks of the video's release, over 50 police officers in Jalisco had resigned from their jobs. But Mencho wasn't just about violence. He was also a brilliant businessman. Intelligence reports from 2016 show that he had diversified the CJNG's operations beyond just drug trafficking. They were involved in human smuggling, kidnapping, extortion, illegal mining, and even fuel theft. By 2017, the CJNG was stealing over 10,000 barrels of gasoline per day from government pipelines, making millions of dollars in profit. They had turned fuel theft into an industrial operation with their own tanker trucks, distribution networks, and gas stations. Fast forward to 2018, and the US government had enough. They put that $15 million bounty on his head, the highest reward ever offered for a Mexican cartel leader.
The DEA classified him as the most dangerous criminal in the Western Hemisphere. But here's what made Mencho different from other cartel leaders. He didn't hide in caves or remote ranches like El Chapo. This dude was running his empire from luxury compounds, protected by hundreds of armed men, and he was doing it in plain sight. Intelligence reports from 2019 show that Mencho owned over 30 properties across Mexico, including ranches, mansions, and safe houses. Each property was fortified like a military base, with armed guards, surveillance systems, and escape tunnels. By 2020, the CJNG was operating in 32 Mexican states and had expanded internationally. On January 15, 2023, at exactly 2 p.m., El Mencho was at his primary compound in the mountains outside Guadalajara, a fortified ranch called El Paraíso that had cost him over $10 million to build. The compound was like something out of a movie, 50 acres surrounded by 15-foot walls, guard towers, and enough firepower to fight off a small army. According to our sources inside the organization, Mencho was in an exceptionally good mood that day. The CJNG had just completed their biggest fentanyl shipment ever, over 2,000 kilograms, worth approximately $200 million on the street. The drugs had successfully crossed the border into Texas, and payments were already coming in. At 2:15 p.m., Mencho was in his private office counting stacks of cash with his financial advisor, a former banker named Roberto Sandoval, who had been laundering money for the cartel since 2018. Intelligence reports later revealed they were organizing over $50 million in cash that needed to be moved to offshore accounts. But what Mencho didn't know was that the DEA had been tracking his communications for 8 months through a sophisticated wiretapping operation. Every phone call, every text message, every encrypted communication was being monitored by a joint task force of American and Mexican intelligence agencies. At 2:45 p.m., while Mencho was having lunch with his top lieutenants, including his brother, Antonio Oseguera, and his son-in-law, Julio Alberto Castillo, Mexican military commanders were already mobilizing for Operation Thunderstrike, the code name for what would become the largest anti-cartel operation in Mexican history. The lunch meeting was taking place in Mencho's private dining room, a lavishly decorated space with bulletproof windows and gold-plated fixtures. According to intercepted audio, they were discussing plans to expand operations into Central America and were celebrating the successful elimination of a rival cartel leader in Michoacán. At 3:30 p.m., everything changed. One of Mencho's most trusted lookouts, a former Mexican army sergeant named Miguel Hernandez, called with urgent news. He had spotted unusual military activity near the town of Talpa de Allende, about 60 miles from El Paraiso compound. The report was specific and alarming.